Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed Live. I'm super excited to have you all joining us today. We have a jam-packed show planned for today. This is our last show of 2022. I think it's our 11th or 12th show. We've been streaming every month. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the Azure SQL Year in Review. And this is actually the second time that we're doing this. So we did this last year in 2021. And essentially what we do is we take all the updates that have happened over the course of the year in Azure SQL and SQL Server, and we put them in a blog with references for you to go check them out. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to spend some time talking about what those updates are, and then we will have some very special guests with us to answer any questions that you might have. So we're going to do an AMA kind of as this continue. So if you want to ask questions, you can go to aka.ms/SQLAMA live and start going ahead and sending your questions or saying hi to us. Looks like we have some folks joining. Hello, hello, hello. So feel free to engage with us. We are checking wherever you're streaming in from, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube, or somewhere else. We are here on Data Exposed. So with that said, I want to bring on some of our experts. You can see that we have a stacked show of experts today. So what I thought, maybe we kick off, just do some quick intros. I think most of you know all of these wonderful people, but we're going to do some quick intros just in case. So we're going to start with Davide. Davide, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of the areas that you'll be best to answer questions on.
Yeah. Hey, Anna, good morning, everyone. I take care of, or I try to take care of everything that is related to developers and developer experience in Azure SQL. So yeah, I'm a developer in my heart. So I really like making sure that Azure SQL is the best place for developers to thrive. And that's what I do.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Davide. Next, let's go Muazma. Muazma, welcome to Data Exposed. Can you tell us a little bit about the areas you cover and we'll be answering questions about today?
Thank you, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Muazma. I'm a PM manager in the Azure SQL team. In Davide's team, actually leading the developer and developer experiences for Azure SQL. And really excited to be here and looking forward to answer any questions in the SQL space. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Muazma. Next, we'll bring up Niko. Niko is no stranger to Data Exposed. Niko, thanks for joining us. Where do you kind of sit in the Azure SQL world?
So in the universe of Azure SQL, I work with from my personal opinion, the most exciting product, which is Azure SQL Managed Instance. So I try to help our customers to get the best usage out of our product.
Awesome, cool. We have no favorite children, but you do, apparently.
Guilty.
Next, I'll bring up Drew. Drew, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Anna, thanks for having me. I'm Drew Skwiers-Koballa. I'm a PM that focuses on SQL experiences, usually around how developers interface with Azure SQL, SQL Server. So a lot of the CLIs, libraries like DAC effects, and then also SQL projects throughout all the different tools that we have.
Awesome, cool, great to have you on. Also in a similar space, we have Erin. Erin, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us about some of the areas you cover?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm also on the SQL Experiences team with Drew. I also have some favorite children, which would be SSMS and Azure Data Studio. So those are two of the tools that I work heavily. They're not competitors, they're siblings. They get along very well. And there's some other areas that I'm interested in. Davide is on the developer side. I am on the engine side in terms of favorites. So I'm always happy to talk about things like query store and extended events and statistics and troubleshooting and all that good stuff.
Awesome, cool. It's great to have you on, Erin.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Bob Ward. He's been around just a little while and claims to know everything about SQL Server. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Well, I only claim that on stage with you at past Data Community Summit because you were outdoing me in our demos together. So I had to make some claim to fame that I know everything about SQL. But, you know, Anna, I love working on anything called SQL, But we have so many rock stars on the show today. I'm just going to sit back and just watch and listen to all the questions directed to them because they have such great knowledge. It's really great to be on your show again. As you know, I've been focusing a little bit lately on this thing called SQL Server 2022, which just went generally available. So it's fun to be back on the show again. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cool. Great to have you. So as you can all see, we have a stacked line of experts. We also have our producer, Marisa Matthews, behind offstage, making sure that we get all your questions and everything pulled up. Yes, we are getting into the season. I have not seen this emoji before, but I'm laughing about it. We got a comment from Doug to bring back the podcast. We also got a question about this. We are going to take it to our other producers to try to make that happen, but unfortunately, no news on that front at this point. We got some other people saying hello or just letting us know that they're here. So thanks for joining us. We're going to get right into the 2022 product updates. We're going to make our way across the product suite. If I missed something, someone will call me out on it and I will update the blog, but that link is where you should be able to find all the references to all the things that I'm going to talk about today. And if there are any updates that I have to make, they will be made in the blog. So go ahead and bookmark that. You'll want to refer back to it in the weeks and months to come, potentially. All right, so we're going to start with SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine. There's been a lot of updates in this space. For each product, we're going to talk about things in public preview and things that are now generally available. So in preview, actually quite recently was the ability to configure an availability group entirely using the Azure portal. This is super cool, pretty much hot off the press. Definitely go check it out. We also released Azure AD with SQL Server Virtual Machines. On the GA side of the house, we released a few things related to security, whether that's the least privileged permission model for the SQL Server IaaS extension. So that's basically the extension that allows you to get all of those Azure-y goodness in your Azure VMs running SQL Server. Also on the security side, we released the security best practices. This was more recently, maybe just a couple weeks ago. A couple things related to best practices assessment. This is now available in the Azure portal as well as through the Azure CLI. Earlier in the year, we released the EBDS v5 series. You'll remember Pamela Hood called this the double sprinkles VM. So we'll put some references to that as well. And we've just done some things to kind of make it easier to manage your virtual machines running SQL Server, whether it's with TempDB, whether it's with availability groups, whether it's during deployment. We're just trying to do a lot here to make it easier to manage. And for those who might have missed it, SQL Server 2012 reached end of support in July. If you want to get those free extended security updates, you can move to an Azure virtual machine. So we'll put some info in on that too. Let's see, we got a comment. It is great to see you joining into the show, Ronaldo. So thank you. All right. We'll move right along to Azure SQL Managed Instance. For this one, I'm going to bring up Niko because he said that this is his favorite child. But there's been a lot of updates in this space over 2022, whether it's in preview or in the GA space. Niko, what are some of the things? I know there's a lot of things, but what are some of the things that stand out to you or you're the most excited about?
So I think that this year, 2022, was really extraordinary for the managed instance product group. We brought so far 48 improvements, announcements that we did in this year. It's almost the double of our best year before. And I would highlight basically the feature wave that we just released at the past summit, which introduces some of the most requested features and the features that allow customers achieve higher availability or save significant amounts of money, such as zone redundancy for the business critical service tier, where we are going even beyond the 4 nines into 4 9.5 of high availability. And then the start-stop feature where customers can run our service and basically suspend the billing for the SQL Server licensing and resume on their desires and needs. Then I would also highlight the link feature for SQL MI, which is one of the hero scenarios for SQL Server 2022, allowing you to connect and fail over to managed instance. And we started introducing even the way back from managed instance back to SQL Server 2022, which is right now running in a limited public preview. I mean, I would take probably 3 hours going over every details. Don't want to steal it. It's you can see very well listed all of the excitement stuff we added. I'm happy to take any questions if the viewers have any.
Awesome. Thanks, Niko. So for those joining in, ask any questions about Azure SQL Managed Instance now. And in just a few minutes, when we get to the AMA, we will ask Niko all of these questions. A couple things that stand out to me just because of things that people have asked many times in the past is transactional replication. This is something that people have been asking to be GA for a very long time. So it's really exciting to see that finally land there. I think the license-free GeoDR, which recently went public preview, is also super exciting. And then the final one I just wanted to highlight is the data virtualization capabilities. I won't go into too much details there, but again, this is something that's been asked about and is really opening opportunities for a lot of cool scenarios. So thank you, Niko. Niko is not going away forever. He will be back to answer any questions that you have at the end of the show. Thanks, Niko. Javier says, hello, tons of news and updates this year. Yes, it has been a busy year, and I mean that in the best way for Azure SQL. All right, moving to Azure SQL Database, there were a lot of also exciting things that happened in this space. I'm going to bring on Muazma and Davide. Maybe, you know, do each of you want to kind of call out some of the favorite things or most exciting things to you that landed this year, starting with Davide?
Yeah, okay, let's start with something I actually was my first project when I joined the product group, and it's named the replicas for hyperscale. That definitely allows a huge scale out for databases, and scaling out databases is pretty complex challenge. But I think we managed to do something pretty nice, and that gives a lot of flexibility. You can scale to have up to 30 replicas. And today, hyperscale supports even 128 core for each replica. So it's quite a lot of cores if you really need a lot of CPU power to process all the incoming transaction. And the second one, so I will pick two, of course, it's the thing that we just released a couple of weeks ago, the ability to call an external REST endpoint. That really opens up the creativity of developers because you can call any REST endpoint from Azure SQL right away. And I'm looking forward to see what developers will do with that. I see a lot of customers using it to integrate with Power BI, to call cognitive services, to call Azure Function, of course. But yeah, the possibilities are endless. So I'm really looking forward to see how our customer will use it.
Awesome, cool, Davide. Muazma, anything that you want to call out or you find especially useful for customers?
Yeah, there's a lot on this list, and again, we are really excited for all the innovation and work that we have done in this space for this year in 2022, and looking forward to a lot more in 2023 as well. A few that stand out to me, Ledger, of course, has been loved by customers with blockchain use cases and a lot more. So if you don't know about it, definitely go check it out. We recently just announced the premium series hardware, which is both memory optimized and compute optimized hardware options for any kind of performance optimization that you want to do on your workloads. Change data capture is also really loved by customers. There's a long list here, so I don't think I have enough time to go through all of this. The integration with Microsoft Purview, that has been a long time ask for customers to have this whole data estate across when you're moving to Azure. So there's definitely that. And then last but not least, the reverse migration to the general purpose of hyperscale. In that case, you're not tied to just go to this particular tier and stay there. If it doesn't work out for you, you can always reverse migrate as well. So again, great list of features here and capabilities, and definitely check them out, and happy to take any questions at the end of the show around these areas as well.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Muazma, and thanks, Davide. Yeah, I think ton of interesting things have landed in this space. I think something to call out is just the innovations that are continuing to happen in the hyperscale space, closing all the gaps that we have had in the past and really making this kind of your go-to tier. So I'm excited to see what happens in this space too. And the other one, I don't know if we mentioned this already, but the emulator for Azure SQL database is also super exciting, that allows you to kind of do local development for free with Azure SQL database. Looks like we did get a couple comments. I know some of them already came up from Bradley. So many great features, external REST endpoint, some excitement there. And we already have some questions. I'm going to save those questions, so stay tuned. We're going to ask all the questions in just a few minutes. But thank you, Davide and Muazma, and we'll see you again soon. All right, moving right along, we're going to talk about some updates that happened kind of across Azure SQL. I'll be honest, I didn't do the best job of segmenting these. Some of these things are things that landed in SQL database and SQL managed instance, and some of these things are things that also landed in SQL Server, but we'll put all the references so you can learn more. You can see there's a lot of things that happen, and one of the great reasons is because at the end of the day, we're all working from the SQL engine, so we can kind of put some of these updates across different services and products. Now, there are a couple cool developer, DevOps related things. For that, I thought, Drew, maybe you could comment on some of the things that are exciting to you or you think developers would be excited about.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about how we get updates kind of across all of the different engine types within SQL is great. It's one of the things that I love is, like, for example, date bucket, the functions, or JSON enhancements. You get to see those in different places. And so that's a fantastic thing. But specifically kind of around DevOps, within the last year, we've added a GitHub SQL action, as well as improvements like SQL package is now a .NET tool that you just install. So those things have been really cool. Those are now available. Things that are in preview that I get really excited about, that like we're continuing to improve more. The first one is the SDK style SQL projects, which is just completely cross-platform. So your .NET build SQL proj is a nice way to have your database in source control and then be able to deploy it from a pipeline, like pretty straightforward. However, outside the DevOps space, we now have an Azure SQL trigger for Azure Functions. So that Azure function will basically watch your database that has change tracking enabled and grab changes to the data there and then run the Azure function anytime the data has changed. The input-output bindings for Azure Functions are available for all the Azure Functions languages. And what this basically means is that if you want to write an Azure function in any language, JavaScript, C#, PowerShell, and you want to connect it to Azure SQL Managed Instance, Azure SQL Database, SQL Server, but you don't want to write a ton of code, this reduces out all that boilerplate code, and you just need to specify a little bit of information and then work with your data. So it's a really nice developer tool for working with Azure Functions.
Awesome, cool, Drew, and thanks. I did miss the actual just Azure SQL bindings for Azure Functions all up. I just hit the Java and PowerShell update, so I will update that in the blog. And yeah, there's just a ton of exciting stuff happening in this space. So if you have any questions about any of the things here or anything else, go ahead and ask them in the chat now, and then Drew will answer them in just a couple minutes. Thanks, Drew. All right, moving right along. To talk about migration. You know, we're always doing a lot of work in this space to try to make migration smoother for you all. We know that it's not always the easiest thing to do, but hopefully the target is desirable and we can make that journey easy enough and pretty smooth, as smooth as possible at least. So we've been doing a lot of work in this space, and I'd say like one of the big themes has been to kind of take all of these different tools that we've been working on and kind of convert them or bring them into extensions in Azure Data Studio. So we've seen a lot of things happen in this space, whether it's the Azure SQL migration extension, the database migration assessment extension. I believe there's also being work done on SSMA and all sorts of things to kind of help you have one tool to kind of migrate from at scale or individually. I wasn't sure where to put this about distributed availability groups. But we do have some options for migrating those from SQL Server to Azure Virtual Machines. Really cool stuff, really fascinating technology you might want to check out. Now, I don't have a specific tools slide. However, since we have Erin on, Erin runs Azure Data Studio and SSMS, I thought this would be a good opportunity to put her on the spot and ask about some of the most exciting things that have kind of happened for Azure Data Studio and or SSMS this year.
Yeah. So on the Azure Data Studio front, as you mentioned, the extensions and migration has been huge. There was a great response to that. And one of the immediate requests was, can you also do this for Azure SQL Database? So as you can see now, that's available in preview, which is fantastic. Along with, we now have a MySQL extension. It's in preview. It was one of the most requested items for Azure Data Studio. That is now available. We're hopefully going to have some changes coming related to Postgres as well. And in Azure Data Studio itself, we GA'd in the last release, which was 1.40, we GA'd Query Plan Viewer and Table Designer. So there's been a lot of requests for, hey, I need to be able to do some kind of troubleshooting performance work within Azure Data Studio. We hear that. So Query Plan Viewer was step one. Stay tuned for what is coming next. This is something that we continue to invest in with Azure Data Studio, improving connection experience. And then on the SSMS front, I know a lot of folks are probably like, what the heck's going on? We've had preview 3 for SSMS 19 for a long time. We've GA'd SQL Server 22. Like, I understand. We hit a few roadblocks that we weren't expecting, but we are hopefully going to deliver preview 4 as an early holiday gift to folks, and we'll be targeting GA for that after the new year. So appreciate your patience, folks. We haven't forgotten about SSMS in any way, shape, or form. So that's definitely coming. And that has full SQL Server 2022 support. It's got UX for contained availability groups as well, which was a great kind of 2022 feature that snuck in there, I think, that most people I haven't seen talk about yet. So lots of stuff going on in both of those spaces.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Erin. So any questions about Azure Data Studio, SSMS, or any other tools, Erin will be here to answer in just a few moments. All right. So now we are going to move on to, I think this is the last area I wanted to cover, and that is Azure Arc updates. So I guess specifically this would be Azure Arc enabled data services updates, not Azure Arc overall. If you've been following Data Exposed, you know that Lior has come on many times to talk about Azure Arc Jumpstart, all the updates in that space. I'm not going to cover those today, but a couple big things that landed was the business critical tier for Azure Arc enabled SQL managed instance. This landed, I think, at build, so earlier this year. Active Directory for Arc enabled SQL managed instance also landed. And something that recently landed in preview was this idea as database as a resource for SQL Server in Azure Arc. So for that, there is one more update, and that is pay-as-you-go pricing for Azure Arc enabled SQL Server. For that, I wanted to bring on Bob to talk a little bit about what that is, and then also maybe show us like some wheel that's cool or something about the final product.
Well, and it's pretty interesting because I was recently at an event a week ago, and I painted a scenario where a company needs to extend a SQL Server resource for like the holiday season, for like bursts of their business. And in Azure, you could do that. You could spin up an Azure virtual machine. You just do pay as you go. You use it for like a month, and then you spin it down, and you've only paid for it when you needed it. And we offer that now for SQL Server. If you can't move to Azure, but you run SQL Server wherever you need it, could be multi-cloud, could be on premises, you can use pay as you go licensing, and it's infused into the SQL setup process. So you can pick standard edition or enterprise edition and just pay per core on an hourly or monthly basis for SQL Server just as you need it. So that, landed pretty well for a lot of customers when they heard about that, because it offers this flexible licensing option that just wasn't possible before.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's super exciting. And I think I think it's a nice segue into the final product we haven't touched on, although for those who have been paying attention are probably aware that SQL Server 2022 became GA or went GA a couple weeks ago. And Bob, I just thought it might be a good opportunity to just share kind of this wheel of power and tell us, just remind folks or folks who might not even know like what the main things are in SQL Server 2022, because I started to list them all out and it was too many things to put in one slide.
Well, hey, it's one of the most power pack releases of SQL Server we've had in our history. And if you look at this wheel and start at the top about cloud connectivity, we just talked about pay-as-you-go licensing through Azure Arc, using it in the SQL 22 setup process. But Niko mentioned managed instance link feature. We didn't mention Synapse Link, the ability to get near real-time analytics by connecting SQL Server and getting changes automatically in Synapse. Muazma mentioned Purview, have that access policy option and preview for Azure Database, but it's GA for SQL Server. And then built-in query intelligence, Anna, parameter-sensitive plans. We're trying to solve problems to get people faster with no code changes. You think about the meat and potatoes down in security, a scalability and availability. Erin mentioned contained availability groups. That's pretty exciting. But you know what I showed off at PASS? The ability to have hands-free TempDB. Yeah, no latching anymore in a TempDB environment, no page latch contention, all possible in SQL 2022. You mentioned data virtualization before. How about connecting SQL Server to a data lake? Recognizing natively Parquet and Delta files, that's pretty exciting. And you talked about some of the T-SQL enhancements in Azure SQL. We've got those all in SQL Server. JSON, some really core T-SQL enhancements that people have been looking for, and then time series support as well. So SQL Server 2022 is one of the most power pack releases we've had. Anna, do you know that we've only launched this thing a couple of weeks ago? We have had over 100 and I believe 80,000 instances deployed of SQL 2022 since we launched it.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. Just shows kind of the promise and the excitement that is not just among us, but also among customers and everyone probably tuning in.
Exactly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Bob. And any questions about SQL 2022, Bob's going to stick around and we will answer them shortly. All right. The last thing for folks who tune in to Data Exposed might be familiar. The last thing that I do in a show is typically do my pick of the month. So I'm going to switch screens really fast and show you the blog. This is you can go see. It should be live now. This is up with links to more information of all of what we talked about today, as well as some information on SQL Server 2022 and a link to the PASS keynote, which is where SQL Server 2022 was announced as generally available. This is a really fun video to go watch and learn about SQL Server, as well as some of the other updates and see some funny demos. I don't know, maybe check it out. But for my pick of the month, I wanted to highlight, I hope that's big enough. I wanted to highlight some of the series that we've done on Data Exposed this past year. Just to call out a few, we did a security series, SQL VM series, which we're actually starting to add new episodes to. So this one's always growing. Same with migrating to SQL. We did a SQL Server 2022 preview series, and we are now doing a even bigger, better 2022 GA series. So check that out. We started something with the SQL Insiders, which is essentially experts internally that work really closely with the customers that we have, and then they share some of the big insights and learnings that they have. And then this was a fun one at PASS Summit. What we did is we filmed some episodes like in the booth at theater sessions. I know Drew did one, and then we had some other folks. I think Niko was in the managed instance one. And you can see we just launched this a day ago and we're still getting some good traction here. And we also have our Azure SQL news updates from last month, which you can stream if you want to see everything that was released specifically at PASS Data Community Summit. So that's kind of my pick of the month is like, you know, things might slow down. Maybe you're taking some vacation. It's a great time to catch up on Data Exposed. Unfortunately, not with the podcast, but hopefully in other ways. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back on all of our experts, and we're going to start taking your questions. We have been collecting questions the past week or so. So we have some offline, and then we've also gotten some great questions in the chat. So give me a second. I'm going to bring everyone back on. So welcome back. Let's see, maybe this is the best way to do this. All right, so we have our experts with us. Again, if you want to interact with us, this link scrolling along the bottom is a good place to put your questions in, although we can see questions coming from Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, so you can just put them wherever you're watching right now. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to call out is when we were looking at external REST endpoints, there were actually a couple comments in the chat. Eduardo said, hey, these are really useful. And also Nerd Herder said, I missed external REST endpoints. What is this about? For that, Davide, do you think you can tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Of course I can. Yeah, so just to summarize very quickly, the idea is that you now have a new storage procedure called SP invoke external REST endpoint that you can use to call any REST endpoint in Azure or with the aid of API management outside Azure. So imagine you have a function that you want to call because a storage procedure has finished executing and you want to send an SMS to someone. You can call a Azure function that will do that for you. Of course, you have to write the code, or you can use a logic app to do the same for you without writing code, for example. Or let's say you have some data coming in and you want to verify if that data is not doesn't present any anomaly. So you can call cognitive services, passing the data, waiting for the few milliseconds that cognitive services take to find anomalies, and then see if there is any anomaly in your data. And you can do all of that in Azure SQL today. Before, you have, in order to do that, you had to poll for data, right? Like continuously check if data was coming in, and then which polling is not exactly efficient, right? So today we are moving into a more event-driven or reactive scenario, and that sort of procedure will enable you to do that. That's on the developer side. On the BI or analytics side, I saw customer using it to execute DAX queries and get the result right into Azure SQL without any other tools, or push data to streaming dataset, for example, in Power BI, so that you can update maybe the status of a process in real time. So that's really, the limit is only your creativity. You can do pretty much everything.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Davide. And hopefully that answers a couple folks' questions, or people who didn't know about it. Now you know. Okay, this next question, I don't know if we have the person who can answer this question. I'm going to throw it up and see if anyone waves. Otherwise, we can follow up offline. Ronaldo says, is there any thought on backporting enhanced access control permissions, new granular permissions to improve adherence with the principle of least privilege? Yeah.
I'll take that one, Anna. Yeah. So this feature, I think Ronaldo's talking about is in SQL Server 2022. We offer the ability now to have more granular fixed server roles. So for example, today, in previous versions of SQL, you have like sysadmin, bulk creator, etc. Now in SQL 2022, we've taken that whole admin concept and made it granular, like performance monitor, security auditor, security manager, those kind of type things. So Ronaldo, at this point, there's no plans to backport those granular fixed server roles back into previous releases of SQL Server. Right now, it's quite frankly a feature that's just been added to SQL Server 2022. But it's exciting to see because it is trying to go after the principle of least privilege to make sure that I can offer the ability to have somebody have access and permissions in SQL Server, but not give them that full sysadmin access. But right now, there is no plans to backport that prior to SQL 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. And hopefully, Ronaldo, that helped. Okay, so I'm going to switch and take a question that we got earlier. This was a submitted question in advance through SQL AMA. This question, I think, is going to be best maybe for Muazma. This question came in as how to develop a career in Azure and how to develop a business on Microsoft SQL Server.
Yeah, so Azure in general is pretty broad, right? So you can go in the compute side, networking side, the storage, we have data centers, and you can go in Azure data itself. So I would recommend you to look at Microsoft Learn to learn about these different areas. We have a lot of great modules and learning material, GitHub repositories where you can actually take a learning path end to end to build your portfolio. Azure DevOps is a great area to start as well if you're a developer developer, just learning about the end-to-end deployment and all of that would be great. Second part of your question about building a business in Microsoft SQL Server. So we see a large amount of customers doing this, right? There are these ISVs. They're using features in Microsoft SQL Server and also in Azure SQL specific to Elastic Pools, where they have fleet of databases doing different things like tax software, like healthcare systems and whatnot. So as Davide was mentioned, it's up to your creativity and how you want to build the business around it. But from a product perspective, we support a lot of that management, a lot of that isolation of different things. And you can definitely take advantage of those features to build your portfolio with Microsoft SQL Server and Azure SQL to build a business around that. Happy to talk to you offline and discuss more if you have other questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Muazma. We actually have someone, maybe actually multiple people on the call that were either part of a business that was based around SQL Server or now or started their own. Davide, I think this might be something that you were a part of. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how, any advice you have?
Yeah, I started my business basically on SQL Server many, many years ago. I've been an MVP for 12 years before joining Microsoft. And so my recommendation is to check out the Azure Data Community. We have a website that gathers all the communities around the world that are focused on SQL Server and Azure SQL right now. And that is a wonderful place to start to get you known, exposed to the community, learn, share what you have learned, learn from the others. And, I can think of many people that started their business in consultancy, for example, just started with SQL Saturday or presenting at community, and then it turned out to be, to become a company, or they still are a consultant. But beside me, many people I know just started there. So definitely, if you want to start a business, the first thing is make sure you are connected with the community. It will give you a jump start for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Davide. And hopefully that helped anyone who's interested in, just getting a little more involved even. All right, let's keep moving along. Okay, Erin, I'm going to toss this question to you. I don't know if you're going to know the answer, but let's see what happens. Shailesh says, in Azure Data Studio with the Oracle assessment, I think that's the extension, is it able to convert code automatically as well in the case of Oracle to Postgres or to Azure SQL DB, I think?
Right. So for the Postgres, it does an assessment of the code. It uses an open source tool to do that, to see if it is ready, if it needs review or work. On the SQL side, on the Azure SQL side, there is not. So we're handling, I think, the data types pretty well, and that the data types are easier to do. But for those of you who know PL SQL, taking what's in PL SQL and converting that to T SQL is definitely a lot of work. So I don't know if that's something that we are looking to do, but at present, that is not automatically going to occur.
Got it. Thanks, Erin. Is this something that they could use like SSMA for in the interim?
SSMA does it does the data type conversion, and I haven't looked at it recently, to be honest, to know if it does the code conversion. It didn't used to, but I've used it previously many years ago, and it's definitely improved. And we just had a recent release, I think in November, a 9 dot something that we're on at this point with SSMA, that does allow you to like review the data types and make sure that they're mapping correctly. But the code piece is definitely more effort.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay, cool. Thanks, Erin, and hopefully that helped Shailesh. All right, so this next question, I think we're going to toss to Niko to give an update. This question came in advance and said, what is happening with the graph tables?
So Graph has been introduced a couple of SQL Server versions ago, and I interpret this question as concern if we have finished developing our Graph story. So happy to share that the story with the SQL Graph is not terminated. There is a continuation, and stay tuned. There will be further development.
Awesome. That's great to hear, Niko. Thanks for Thanks for that update, and hopefully that helps the person who asked that question. Okay, so this next question, I think maybe we'll toss to Drew. This question, or maybe this was a feedback item, is that they want to be able to use create or add or alter in an Azure Data Studio project build. I guess when they do this, the project fails.
Yes. So right now, the SQL projects expect only create statements, not transaction level alter statements. And so this functionality of SQL that's kind of on the line between the two of them is not currently supported, but it's definitely feedback that I have heard, and hearing it now, I really appreciate that the interest in it, and we'll look at it for future improvements to SQL projects to make them as powerful as they can be for however you're developing.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Hopefully that helps. This is one, I think they might be talking about the ideas website. I'm not sure if anyone has an idea which one they're referring to and if we have the URL, but we can throw it up there. Soft Taco Raider says, I think there's a feature request portal available.
I think it's in response to the previous one, which was a dark mode of Management Studio.
Okay,
yeah. So there is a feedback site, which is where we take requests related to SSMS. It's aka.ms/feedback. I think if you just go there, and then there's SQL. And yes, we know that dark mode is an oft requested item for Management Studio. I'll be honest in that the level of effort that is required to do that really precludes us from hopping onto that for the time being. So that is not on the roadmap. There are some third-party options that help make that a better reality for folks. And I'll just a little gentle reminder that Azure Data Studio does have dark mode for those who truly love that.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Okay, for this next question, it's about Polybase. The question is, will data virtualization with Polybase even become, or maybe ever become available for Azure SQL database? Muazma, is this one you can take, or is someone else on the call?
I'm not.
Looks like we lost Davide. So maybe when Davide comes back, we will re-ask this question. All right. Okay, this next question. Okay, I like this one. This is a good one. We can go through a couple people. This one is, what's your favorite feature of SQL Server 2022? Anyone want to start or make Bob go last?
Go, Bob. And then we need an hour.
So for me, I think it's a little bit less about like specific features, but how many features are in standard and express. Because like people forget about express because it's free and it's like, oh, if I don't have to pay for it, like what does it have? But it has like so many other great features, including Ledger. So if you're looking at the SQL 22 features and anything speaks to you, don't write off like that it's going to be very likely available in SQL Express and other versions.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Also, I'm sorry, Bob, that wasn't super nice of me. Bob, what is your favorite feature of SQL 2022?
This is not a fair show. I'm not coming to the show anymore. You're going to make me piss off every developer in the SQL Server team by not picking their feature. So here's what I'm going to do. You saw my wheel of power. I'm going to pick a feature that no one knows about. Okay. There's somebody on our team named Purvi Shah, not just one of the smartest people on the planet, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And she works on performance. So I always ping her during these releases like, Purvi, you know, the stuff you work on doesn't show up on a marketing sheet somewhere, but people care about it. So what have you been working on? So she sent me a huge list of things. And at the very end of her list was something called instant file initialization for the transaction log. And I'm like, what? So this has been something that everybody's asking for years. We haven't been able to figure out how to not zero the log when we grow it because we can't recognize the true end of the log because of the way it's written. And so she figured out how to do that. And we're talking about like real practical scenarios where customers run workloads and be blocked because we're trying to grow the log file, right? Well, she's just solved it. It's just built into the engine, part of SQL 2022 in all editions. So that's one of my favorites, just because it's somebody that nobody really knows about, but who's one of our heroes of SQL Server, and a really cool practical thing that we put in the product.
Awesome. I love it. And I know that's an exciting one. Does anyone else have any favorite? I know we could spend probably a whole episode, but does anyone else have any favorite SQL 2022 features they want to call out?
I can call out
I know
all the
Niko's got
T-SQL.
one. Go ahead, Muazma.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to call out all the T-SQL enhancements, all the amazing amount of functions they've been asked for a long time, the JSON enhancements, the time series stuff, all the things that we talked about. I think they're really, really exciting, and I see them already. We look at the telemetry and see like how customers are using it. So it's amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, 100%. All right, Niko, what do you got?
What would you expect me to say in the current role, right? You know the feature? Of course.
I do.
And it's not what you would expect, as you would expect, right? So my favorite feature is the performance enhancement for predicate pushdown on the and segment elimination for the column store indexes based on the strings. This one has been, like, since the launch of the column store indexes in 2012, this has been like one and a kind of an Everest for the performance, because a lot of data warehouses, unfortunately, are designed with way too much focus on strings, and the segment elimination or row group elimination is so essential. I'm super excited. I want to hear what the customers will tell once they start deploying the SQL Server 2022. This has been listed in our What's New, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback on that. This one will be really lovely.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good one. I will say that wasn't what I was expecting you to say. But
I will get fired after, but I did my best.
Erin, I don't want to leave you out. Was there something from 2022 you're really excited about?
Well, there's a tiny caveat in that this is something that's still in preview, even with 2022 GA'd. But it's something that I got asked about every time I presented on Query Store, which was Query Store on secondary replicas. So it's still in preview, but it's going to be there, and I know that it's going to make a lot of folks make their lives a lot easier. So you could probably have predicted it would be something Query Store related.
Awesome. You are also not alone on that one. I know a lot of people have asked for that.
Yes.
And people are excited about IQP in general as well, like IQP Next Gen. So I think all around Query Store, IQP, lots of exciting things happening. Let's see. We've also got some comments that people are excited about some of the answers that we've given. So thanks for giving us that feedback. Davide, you're back. We asked a question that I think would be good for you, so I'm going to bring it back up. And this question was around data virtualization with Polybase and Azure SQL database.
Oh, that's for me? Okay. So yeah, sorry, I had a power glitch and everything restarted. Anyway.
It happens.
No, yeah, definitely. That's something that the developer has been asking for a while. I don't think we have announced anything yet. We know that this is something that it's very important to make it easier, for developing application where data is basically stored anywhere. So I cannot share anything at the moment, but definitely we know it's important. So we have plans for 2023 to see what we can do to make it happen.
Cool. Thanks, Davide.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to revisit some of the questions that came on during the stream. Just give me a wave if this is something that you think you might be able to help. This question came in and says, how do you compare CDC and blockchain, or I guess this would be SQL Ledger capabilities? When should you use one versus the other?
So I can take that. So one, I don't think it's the one versus the other. It depends on your use case and what you're doing with your kind of data estate and how data lands in your transactional system, and what you do after that. So I will explain these features a little bit for you, and then I think from a customer perspective, you can decide when to choose which feature for your use case. So CDC is our change data capture. That means that as soon as there is a change in your data, you can have something downstream of it to do some actions. A lot of our customers are actually using it to use that change of data to be captured and then do something else. So we see a lot of big customers using that. You can actually do based on any changes in your data. It could be new rows added or any updates to their data as well. Now, blockchain, or in this case, ledger, is a completely, I would say, different set of features where you can use it in integration with CDC, for example, but they're not dependent on each other. So blockchain is where we see customers where they actually store the data and they don't want it to be kind of added over. So ledger provides kind of tables where we do not want to update. A lot of customers put the data in there. They have a record of history of who updated that, and it's used in a lot of situations where you have auditing needs, and then blockchain use cases, of course, because you have stamped off information of who updated and then you can't go back and update in some cases as well. So there's a lot of different type of use cases where customers are using blockchain, and I'm pretty sure I did not explain all of that really well. Maybe Bob can chime in a little bit more on the blockchain side of things. So from a customer perspective, you can use these both in conjunction. You can use one or the other depending on your use case, depending on how your data lands and what you want to do next with that data. It's an interesting idea to look at, like how customers using it together as well. So I wouldn't just say use one or the other, but see how your use cases are kind of combined together to make usage of both these features.
Bob, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Muazma did a very good job explaining that. I would say the one thing about Ledger for SQL, which is an Azure SQL database, and in SQL 2022, is this idea of tamper-evident record of data. So one of the cool things about Ledger, as soon as you build a Ledger table, we record something called a database ledger inside the database itself through system tables. And it is actually the blockchain using Merkle trees inside SQL Server. But then we support the idea of what's called a database digest. So think of like a checksum and a checksum. It's a hash stored separately from the database. So now it provides this idea of a decentralized trust model. Let's say you got a supply chain. You got multiple companies all trying to make sure they trust the data, but who's in charge of the data? So if all of a sudden one company was in charge of the SQL database, they're going to be worried that company may tamper with that. The digest gives this independent way to trust that the data has not been tampered with. So in addition to what Muazma said about things like tracking who changed it, or even doing like an append-only ledger to just do inserts, you have this tamper evidence. And that's truly what is provided by blockchains in the industry. The difference is that blockchains are implemented today in a decentralized system, like across the internet. So it's not performant, and you don't have that great management capabilities that SQL provides. So we are actually looking at Ledger now for SQL in a way independent of SQL, almost like a product. Did you know in Azure SQL database, you can even say your entire database is a Ledger database. So think of just those scenarios for auditing or supply chain scenarios where Ledger can provide, kind of a business requirement that people did not think of SQL before.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. We got some hot questions in. This next question is, do we have an ETA for compat level 160 on Azure SQL?
It's there. So if
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I just double checked the docs to make sure.
But it's not the default, right, Erin?
It's just not the default. It's not the default, right? So the default is still 150, according to the docs. I haven't created an Azure SQL database lately to double check that, which is usually what I would do. But we do support 160. You can change that either in your favorite tool of Azure Data Studio or SSMS.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Okay, this next question comes from Eddie. This says, just joining after work. Apologies if this was asked. How close are we to SQL Server Docker running on M1 Max. SQL Edge doesn't really support SQL data, spatial data types, T-SQL functions. So I think that's kind of two questions. Drew, can you take a stab at this?
Yep. Hey, Eddie. So for getting SQL Server, the full image running on M1 Max ARM machines, that is something that's still in progress. I don't have a date to share, but I'm right there with you that we want to be able to use some of the functionality that's not available on SQL Edge, kind of no matter where you're running SQL. So it is something that's in progress. And I would say we're definitely closer than we were maybe 6 months ago when we released a local developer environment where you take a SQL project and deploy it to a new container locally. So that was about 6 months ago we released that. We definitely weren't there yet then, but we're a lot closer now. And so it is exciting. Glad to hear that you're using the spatial data types. I hope they're working out great for you.
Cool. Thanks, Drew. We have a couple more minutes and we have a couple more questions. Keep them coming. Bob, I think this might be a good question for you, but let me know if someone else wants to take it. This is there a migration from an availability group to a contained availability group?
Yeah, it's a great question. So today, right now, when you create an availability group as contained, you must create it as contained. You cannot alter an existing AG and say, oh, this is now a contained AG. So today in SQL 2022, you need to start off with your AG being contained. That's a good request that we should put in SQL feedback for customers to be able to take their existing ones and make them contained. Just remember, when we do this, we will take the sysadmin logins from your database and put them in the contained master database. But yeah, you need to start out with a create a contained G when you create it today.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. And hopefully, Ronaldo, that helped. We have some people who are dropping off. We're nearing the end of the hour. We have a couple more questions left. But before you drop off, I want to make sure everyone knows, like, if you like this AMA format, you want us to do this more often, please find a way to let us know. You can comment wherever you're streaming from. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Azure SQL. We want to know if we should do more of these for you all and if they're helpful. So please let us know any way that you can. We did get a couple comments that, you know, they've really found this really useful. But the more you can let us know, the more we know, like, this is something we should do or not do going forward. Okay, that being said, we have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to try to get through as many questions that came in. This is an interesting one. I think it's related to Azure SQL. So it's saying, which SQL service tier should I choose to enable the most effective auto scale up and down options and to keep the cost of Azure resources to a minimum? Davide, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, I can take that. And yeah, you probably know the answer to Anna, because I remember when we did the sample on the bus, on catching the bus and everything, we used the Azure SQL serverless, because basically with serverless, it will automatically, you can set a range in between, you want a vCore, so you can say, you can go down to 0.5 vCore, if I remember correctly. And today you can go up to 8, or maybe we just updated that number. But so Azure SQL Serverless will automatically move between that range in order to satisfy the workload. And then when you don't need anymore, you don't even have to stop it. It will stop by itself. So at nighttime, let's say you're not developing, or maybe during daytime because you are developing at nighttime, it will just stop and you will not pay for it. And above all, you will pay by the second. So it's pretty neat to save money and at the same time have a great performance. So it's great for developers and also great for every time you have a very unpredictable workload. So we will try to figure out the best vCore for you. So Azure
awesome.
SQL,
yeah, serverless is the thing to check out, the thing to keep staying posted on, all the updates that we're doing in that space. But definitely agree. Okay, so as we wrap the episode, I want to share a couple things. It looks like NerdHerder responded that yes, this was useful. Ronaldo said, love the AMA format. Homer, shout out to MC Homer. This was great and helpful. Eddie and Felipe, by the way, was able to change his Azure SQL database to 160. Love that, like, live updates and feedback. Ashok says really helpful, and Jonas Hughes says great format for reviewing. So again, continue to bring those comments in for us. Again, I'll try to put the news update. Thank you. If you want to see all the news from the year, go to aka.ms/news update. It's been a fantastic year. We released so much across SQL Server and Azure SQL. We've been super excited to do it with you all's feedback, support, guidance, input every step of the way. So thank you for being part of our SQL community and tuning into Data Exposed. We will be back next year, hopefully with more exciting news updates. And I think that's all I got. So we hope to see you next year on Data Exposed.